Good evening. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you to everyone who's here tonight. Welcome. Welcome to this celebration of poetry on our National Poetry Day. Events are happening all over the country, and it's a wonderful thing. We are a nation of poets. We're not all rugby players. Rugby players even write poems. We are a nation of poets, and we're a nation of poetry readers. And there are often times when poetry collections are on the bestseller list in New Zealand. And I think currently, if it's still on, the Essential New Zealand Poetry Collection that was recently launched is on the bestseller list. So it's important to us. That's why we're here. Thanks, Kay, for your introduction and for your thinking of the sponsors. I would also like to mention individuals from the New Zealand Society of Authors, as well as the branch itself, but Carolyn McCurdy and Jackie Ballantyne in particular. And if I could also thank the UBS not just for being here tonight and for being such a staunch supporter of Dunedin writers and writing generally, independent bookstore par excellence. We should worship at their doorstep. We should go across that doorstep, and then we should worship at their till. Because we need them too, and it's very important for us as a community, it's important for us as writers, and it's a fantastic shop to have in the heart of Dunedin. It's a bookshop with a heart, actually, and they are becoming few and far between. Only the best will survive, so we must support them. So as well as thanking them for just being here and for that general support, I'd like to thank them for their generous sponsorship of the inaugural Dunedin Secondary School Poetry Competition. Perhaps think would be a name for it in that. Because they have generously sponsored the prizes for that competition, and I'll talk about that shortly. I'd also like to thank ArtsNet and ArtsNet Director Doug Lilly for his support and his website and publicity help. There's a website called rightnow.org.nz on which you can read the winning poems from the Dunedin Secondary School Poetry Competition and find out a bit about what that was about. And I'd like to thank Kay Mercer and Casey Thomas, who designed the wonderful posters, and the Dunedin Library. Thank you. Right. And one more piece of housekeeping. Phones off, please. Oh, and doors are there. Toilets are out there. We will have a break at half time, so we can hear some poetry, have a short break, we can go and recharge your glasses, have a little nibble to eat, talk, and come back in. That break will only be 10 minutes long. Afterwards, there may well be time, as Kay says, for poets to sign any posters or books that you may have purchased. And I'm sure the poets will be very happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk about poems or poetry. The Dunedin Secondary School Poetry Competition. Generally on this day every year we have some function or functions in the city to acknowledge and celebrate poetry. This year no exception. And I should also mention that there are many things going on in the city today. One of them was an event organised by David Howard at the university in the Link, and where people walking through the Link were treated to poems across a wide range of topics and through a wide range of history. That was a wonderful event. And I know that Bayfield High School has also had an event today, and I've been involved in something at Columbia College, so lots of things been happening here. But we think it's important, those of us writers getting along the tooth, that we encourage and nurture the new generation of writers, because otherwise what will happen to literature? We really want to support young writers because they're the voice of the future, and I think it's really important that they get a chance to publish their work and to read their work in public, because people forget, young people are writing vigorous and intelligent and vibrant poetry. They enjoy it, they enjoy doing it, they are drawn to the medium because it's a powerful medium. And I just wanted to say a couple of things about the importance of that. you see that secondary school competition drew 51 entries, which was fantastic. 51 entries, 51 poems were written across the city and put into the competition. It was really hard to choose the winners. The standard of writing was really high, and that was a tremendous thing to see. It was also very challenging. The poets, the young poets, are challenging themselves to write work that really stretches the imagination, stretches the intellect, stretches their philosophical focus, stretches them politically, stretches them emotionally, and that was fantastic to see. But doing so, and this is the most important thing, that doing so in a way that used a control of these powerful motivations. So they're writing within a controlled form and learning to use the tools of language in a way that makes a work of art out of this very powerful material. I think that's really an important thing about poetry. I think that's why it's so important in our communities. It hones whole person intelligence because it integrates the body, the heart, the spirit, the mind, and it cultivates independence of voice. And yet, as much as it's about expression, it's also about restraint. Because the more you write, the more you become aware of the power of the language that you're using. You become aware of nuance, you become aware of double meanings, you become aware of possible misinterpretations. You become aware of this power, and you have to learn to better skills at handling that language. It's like learning to work, I think, sometimes with dynamite once you realise what you're working with. And I think it's a skill that some adults would do well to practice. So thankfully we have young people doing it, and they will be our leaders of the future. Wordsworth said that the poet's craft is a matter of putting the best words in the best order. Controversial little statement actually, but it's a pretty good assessment. Putting the best words in the best order. And the winning poems in the Dunedin secondary school poetry competition all showed that quality. I thought that they were all sort of very well tuned for the particular song that each of them wanted to sing. The 3 winning poems, I felt that they stretched their skill, they stretched things to a much more demanding level, linguistically, poetically, and philosophically. And so, what we're going to do to start with is I'm going to announce the winners of that competition and the commended poems in that competition. And I'm going to ask them, and this is really generous of these poets, they are going to read their poems in this to us tonight. I think it's fantastic. So we will hear them voice their work and lift it off the page. The 3 winning poems are on posters. So if you like them, you can, as Kay said, you may like to purchase a big copy. Well, at least one of them. Take your room with poems. Right. As I call these your names, could you just come on up and just sort of gather here? I know it's not very it's a bit informal, but that's what we'll do. I'm going to name the highly commended poets first. So highly commended in the Dunedin Secondary School Poetry Competition. Ellen Waite, Year 10, Columba College, for a violin solo. Kristen Geelong, are you here? Yes, Kristen. From Tyree College. Kristen Geelong from Tyree College, Year 9, for Life is Fun. Well done. There's a highly commended poet who's not here tonight. There's Abigail Nardo from Logan Park High School, Year 10, for her poem We'll Cross That Bridge, that I will read for her. And Josephine Devereaux, Year 13, from Logan Park, was highly commended for 2 poems, Duteous and The Obligation. So. Now, the actual 1, 2, 3 placings, starting with 3rd place, I would like to congratulate Jacoby Kohu Morris from Year 12, Logan Park High School, for a man's world. 2nd place went to a lovely sonnet by a Year 9 student at Columba College, Molly Crichton. just realised I think the new prize as well. Terrible. Actually. And first place in this competition, she's already standing here because she also had 2 other poems commended, and it's Josephine Debro, year 13, Open House. And I would really like to invite Josephine to read her winning poem first. If you could announce the titles of your poems, Josephine, when you come up, and her 2 commended poems also, and then we'll all of you have a chance to read. Just stay here. I know it's uncomfortable, but if you want to look at the news, the face of young poetry, I think it's good. So, Josephine.
Keeping up appearances. The sun has struck a bitter chord as its yellow light bastes the treetops. And even the tiny spider in the left-hand corner has crept away. But smile! 1, 2, 3, for the camera, as we stiffly sit in the statement car, racking our archives for conversation. And it's one for the frames, a high-resolution shot for a picture-perfect outing. Duteous. March, little antmen, one by one. Watching the coastline, shoulder your gun. One of a number we'll forget, just another bested by a bayonet. The obligation. My face aches. It has been stretched like this, most unnaturally, since the moment I pulled into the crunchy driveway. Her watery eyes stare past me at the gaudy idyllic landscape painting hanging lopsided on the wall, garish, thick strokes, saturated neon hues. She knows nothing of my crocodile smile, my beeping phone, and oh dear, I really must check it soon. If only she could see herself. A spotted, paper-thin husk, a hollow remnant of what once was. I will be the one to initiate the pleasantries. Inhale. Hello, Mother. The words, so lackluster in their formation, missed their mark entirely, swooping down and landing in a heap, scattering on the ornamental carpet. Thankfully, the pile will never be big enough as to warrant attention, so I make no attempt to brush them off. The fallen letters, that is. There are people for that, regardless. Well, you are looking... well... The summer is agreeing with you, clearly. Lies. All lies through a clenched jaw. In truth, she has never looked closer to fragility, so snappable, her body having trumped her mind. Bluish-tinged gauze stretched over poorly concealed bone, wrinkles set in stubborn formation. And still she gazes, mouth agape, drifting in and out of concentration, but always settling her gaze on the awful painting that had chosen muse for today. I can't think why. If a hilly paddock is novel to her, she has clearly forgotten how many she used to own. Beep, beep, beep. Oh, it's the phone, and sorry, Mother, but I really must leave. Thank goodness. If only for a moment. There's at least 4 more questions for her not to register before I can escape today.
the range of what is possible in poetry and how these young people are pushing out that form, compressing it, pushing it out. It's fantastic. Second place, Molly Crichton. I would love you to come up and read your poem, Gracious. This is a sonnet.
Gracious. If I could leap or dance or spin, an orchestration of my limbs, or paint a picture to convey the pure, untold bright of day, conduct a fearful symphony, setting unheard music free, sing a worship to the stars, sending vocal glory far, release all those who have been caged, bring justice to the world again, for gracious is the sympathy of those who understand the need, the beauty to be whole once more, no fighting evil, sin or war.
This one we do A Man's World.
The name of that should have been A Man's World question mark. The world of the strictly old boys' room of the Commons engulfed a mini-industrial revolution. The pointy cigars billowing smoke like crusty chimneys. The wrinkled suitors as grey as newly constructed skyscrapers that tower over our old England. They sit there lazily in their relic leather thrones, whinging, whining, griping, while some old fools slouch in the backbenches just to earn their treasure from the exchequer. And then she came, strutting through valleys of men with every single step, more conviction than half of Scotland Yard. One small step for man, one giant leap for woman. Her hair perfectly built, her suit carefully starched, and her trusty trademark handbag ready to discipline. This is a man's world. And then she came.
Thank you, Jacoby. And again, you know, the political and the philosophical and the kind of the different slant on history and received knowledge, all really good stuff. I'm going to read a poem now by Abigail Nado from Logan Park High School, Year 10. It's called We'll Cross That Bridge Once We Get There. The bridge says no. Wishes you cross it now. Just talk about the bridge. Share your feelings about the bridge. Communicate, inform, relate and connect. Get it across. Because that bridge would rather it burn and you take that step and get across. Justin Jerome from Tyree College, Year 10. Year 9.
Life is fun. The fence at the top is delicate. Girls always chase boys. Excitement. Think about your future life. War. Idealism is a sin. Quizzing. Get your bones shaking. Rebel. Celebrating peace, not war. It's a beauty within. Personality. What people are doing. Pop. Live in the dream. Glamorous. Liar, liar, your pants is on fire. Hot. You're in trouble now. Handle. Don't exaggerate your life. Atomic. Party till you drop. Glossy. Life is too short to live. Friends. Make the most of it. Fantastic.
And Ellen, we're just sitting out here all by yourself. This is Ellen Waite from Columbia College Year 10 with her poem, A Violin Solo.
A violin solo. A violin solo cut into the darkness as though it were opening the black in the hope of finding the light, but to no avail. Instead, it twists and cuts the heart, flooding the body with sound. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you for reading. It's fantastic to hear those poems voiced, because poems are like, they come to life when you voice them. And thank you to everyone, all the teachers who helped or encouraged students to enter work. Thank you so much. We are a city of readers and writers, and as I say, this is the next generation. These people will be writing books, so their books will be on that table in another decade, and it's great that we get the first chance to hear them. Right, moving on to the next part of the program. We're going to hear just now, before we have a short break, from two very well-respected and well-known, well-established New Zealand poets, both of whom we are very lucky to have, one living in the city and one living close enough to visit us regularly. I would like to introduce Owen Marshall to begin with as our first reader. Owen Marshall, there won't be anyone in the room who doesn't know Owen's name, I'm sure. Owen has written or edited over 30 books, including short stories, novels and poetry. And Dunedin readers will probably be very fond of his penultimate novel, is that the right way to express it? The Larnacks, set about Larnac Castle and the Larnac family. His most recent novel is Carnival Sky, which came out earlier this year. He has received numerous honours, awards and fellowships for his work. His novel Harlequin Rex won the 2000 Deutz Medal for Fiction at the Montana Book Awards. He held the 1992 Boom Scholarship. He's held the Catherine Mansfield Memorial Fellowship in Montauk, France. In 2000, he became an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to literature. And in 2012, you realise I praise you here, right? This is I'm praising you. In 2012, became a companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit. In 2013, Owen Marshall was awarded the Prime Minister's Award for Literary Achievement. On his website, someone talks about Owen's, a character of Owen's fiction writing, which I think applies equally well to his poetry. The psychological landscapes of his fellow New Zealanders are his fundamental concern. His interest is in mood and character and fragrance of experience. What he looks for in all the arts is some insight into the business of living. Auckland poet Paula Breen calls him a life watcher, training his figurative binoculars upon detail that renders his lines lucid and vital. Owen, I'd like to welcome you to read to us tonight.
Thank you, Sue, for those kind comments. I'm delighted to be here this evening, particularly in the company of so many fine fellow poets, the young poets included. I'm not going to read too many because time's getting on, but and most of them are quite short. The first poem's called Small Child on a Trampoline. It's just a little observation poem. And I see a little girl bouncing, fearless and alone upon the trampoline, higher and higher until the perfect instant of equilibrium between momentum to the sky and the drive of gravity to the core. And she is transfixed there forever, weightless, smiling open-mouthed, dark hair flung out, skinny legs free of duty, hands outstretched as stars against the buttoned white flowers of the dogwood trees. The next poem is called Norseman. A dull funeral, Meggie, you would have scoffed had you been alive. Your Blenheim cousin scratched his backside and talked of prices throughout the eulogy. I tried for better in imagination, glimpse the heroic perhaps, as luminous, cleaving the smoke and mist of the fjord, glides the fire ship of death to far Valhalla. The affronted, rearing prow above the burning timbers, and you, lying solitary amid the flames and flowers, with sword and hornet helmet, all endeavours over, all loyalty repaid. Fire and water contesting as you passed, while here your cousin made a grimace from the beginnings of a yawn, and Irene's youngest stared through the window at the withered lawn. Next one's called Schoolmaster. It might apply to schoolmistresses as well. There he is at our reunion, tall, husk pale as if the endless classes have bled him, even as he held the line for his derided learning. Old boys approach him as casual equals, drop in their accomplishments, then among their fellows use his nickname for amusement. Call up scenes from the theatre of their youth. That smile, they say, like a slow ebb tide, that sense of humour, not so much dry as arid. He remains chained in a place they have outgrown, yet has the dancing bear's pained and inward dignity, despite the antics he must perform. From the back, it was just like you.
For me, Vincent O'Sullivan is the great observer of New Zealand voice, and I have always been in awe of the way that he represents voice in his poetry, how he can swoop from high to low register, from formal to informal, from erudite and learned to casual, flippant, sometimes even base. He can be conversational and confiding and generous, always intelligent, witty, often very funny, and much sharper than you thought when you made yourself comfy to listen to him, to listen to his yarn, because he'll often tell us a yarn, but just be careful because there are sharp points. This year, Anna Jackson has talked about him as having a kind of luminous spirituality in his work, and other people always will refer to his powerful intellect. To me, he always seems to be driven by curiosity, about the curious business of being human. This year, Vincent published a collection of short stories called The Families, and a collection of poems called Us Be, which has been nominated for the New Zealand Post Book Awards this year. A selection of poems is due for publication later this year. I'd like to welcome Vincent O'Sullivan to read.
Thank you very much, Sue. And good evening. It's a great pleasure to be here and to read with poets I very much enjoy poetry. And on a Saturday morning, when it usually happens, and the urge comes on to write a poem, you ring Poets Anonymous, and they send a man around with half a dozen or a couple of bottles of wine, and they sit with you until the urge goes away. Well, I'll start with the poem that's on the poster called They're Here, he said. You can't imagine what it was like to see a creature other than rats, to see, he meant, its living pertness, its ears alert and standing and the sun pink through them, a kind of warmth we'd as good as forgot. Its odd, insistent confidence, its pause casual even between coiled snagging wire as if mere brambles, not a dozen yards to the left, a corpse-infested ditch. He said, "We watched him with childish wonder, as though an angel had landed at an atheist's picnic, a Methodist as he'd been then, wryly thinking back. And no one, none, the hare, the angel, the bleeding enemy, us, knowing who would disturb it first, who'd regret forever, wrecking its undamaged world. And who did? He couldn't tell you. The one fine thing worth remembering," he says, "the hare." And I thought for a few minutes I'd read things that aren't really quite poems. These are from next week in Wellington. There's a performance of a song cycle that Ross Harris, the composer, has written the music to, and it's called Notes from the Front. And they're songs about, or songs relating to that great Dunedin figure, Alexander Aitken. And Aitken, if you probably, those who don't know, has written the classic First World War account from Gallipoli to the Somme. And then he was also went on to become, for most of his life, the professor of mathematics in Edinburgh. He was not only good, he was a great mathematician and an enormously interesting character. And this series of songs we did, Notes from the Front, was to honour him. We called it Notes from the Front because he was also a gifted amateur musician, and he did probably the only person in the war to have done this. He actually took a violin through the Gallipoli campaign and through northern France. And he was able to do this by keeping in with the cooks who smuggled the violin through in the big pots in the kitchens. He also wrote, kept a journal for a time, and so I've drawn on that. So what I'd like to, and when I say they're not quite poems, of course songs never are, that a song is not, a poem has to be freestanding, it has to be a complete sort of verbal structure, but a song is never completed until you have the music. So it's the score, it's the verbal score for what is going to be musically completed or accomplished later on. So that's why I think when you write songs, they sound very different to the sort of poetry that you generally write, because you're doing something quite different. You're doing something that the musician has to accept as sort of emotionally and technically manageable for himself. And you also, in a sense, have to be the straight man for the musician, who's always the important one, I think, in the writing of songs. So I'll just read the words for some of these songs from Notes from the Front. The first one, called Visions, almost all the words and all the images in this are taken from Aitken's own journals. Regularly, at various intervals after the war, even when he had the chair in Edinburgh, he would have periods of breakdown and would have to, simply go away and recuperate, with the war simply taking him over again. And in his diaries, he recorded the sort of things he heard and saw during these periods of breakdown. So this first one is called Visions Much Later. Under moons of harvest, stand still all night the sheaves. In timeless light I join the dying sheep, the final stooks. There past the voices tell me, the careless people, per la città dolente. Nightmare seizes me, the veiled figures. The skyline lives, the mountains toss their horns. Ah, timeless light, I count on nothing more. And the next poem in the series is just called The Notes. And it's sort of a very simple song. By the way, these songs are going to be sung by Richard Gray, the opera tenor, and they'll be accompanied by piano and, of course, violin. The notes, you so clearly hear them, it's that quiet fellow, the note between concussions, Aitken from Portobello, who stood with his stopwatch ready, If the officer's gone, cool they said his bloody pack ice, talking his men on. And the weird beauty of it and the silence after the din. Aitken from the peninsula, that's his violin. And this one is called What We Don't Tell Them at Home. It's the shit and thirst and another man dies. That's how you tell the Anzacs. You can sing about this, you can preach about that. You can think of the poppy in the schoolgirl's hat, the colour that welds when the next man's shot and the flies blow the carcasses of Anzacs. How it's Tom from Mosfield, it's Rosalind Jack, the bloke from Tuatapere, the sun turns black, and Harry who's rambling down with Milford Track. But hey, there's a different drum. It's a different lingo now you've come, it's another sky you're hiding from. But you're just as strayed, you're struck as dumb. It's a change from Gallipoli, soldier, when you reach the sun. And this one's called On a Different Note. In the trenches he often played requests for soldiers. Interesting, the most popular piece he was asked for was Dvorak's Humorous, the one that the soldiers wanted to hear most, but he also played, and there was one extraordinary occasion when he was playing Haydn in northern France, and someone started playing it back from the German trenches. So on a different note, one note in a beginning of the war, a note heard by chance. You hear it as you might observe a star. Noel in a dugout that Turkish Christmas, a German playing Haydn from a trench in France. A tinny violin cuts our heart to pieces. A single line, defying war, defying war. And the next song is based on what was a fairly common occurrence in the war. You read about it in Robert Graves' Revival that Aitken himself talks about, and that's the curious experience of seeing someone and you're not sure of whether they've been killed or not. And so this, why often in the trench experience there was sort of very ready belief in ghosts and that sort of thing. And Aitken talks about that, and just based on that. I meet him walking the Peninsula Road, we think of each other, friend, alive or dead. Our smile is not quite that of the living, not quite that of the dead. We met so often when we were young, above the narrow harbour, before the grass flared and the sky hung streaming fire, before grass flared. We meet where one of us now has no shadow, one in April sunlight, passing close as this, one of us living, one of us dead, close as this. And the final song is called Song for Winifred, who was his wife and really was a massive physical and spiritual support to him through his life. After the gift of madness, the common sun. After the frozen months, see, the creeks run. After the sky's long pall, we walk together across the wide paddocks love in any weather. Hear the touch of the wind in the summer grass. Thank God, the seasons pass, the seasons pass. Shorter ones. This one's called, I noticed in visiting a friend, an old person's room, a notice says, life writing 4 to 5 in the leisure lounge. And it's a long time since bosoms went off the agenda. Since Yeats's I've spread my dreams was a carpet ad. I'd like to write love poems about you, but love at your age, my son's already told me, just forget it, Dad. You'll notice my accepting love has no wish list. It is said without rancour, as it is with occasional rhyme. If one faces the western window, one may glimpse the sunset. One says, forget it, my love, without beating time. Passionless as a neutered cat in an art class painting, we sip at our Milo as the colours dry on the page. I think I have found an image not likely to offend, a bloody great springing Tom spitting pure rage. And this is just sort of a bit of a lyric piece. It's called Untuned for Two Voices. The idiot wanting all things clear, the lover demanding them tangled. The idiot grins at the placid air, the lover at storms that mangled. Every day, oh every day, the wind is blowing them both away. The madder I am, the more I see the idiot comprehended. The fullest branch on the laden tree cracked as the season ended. Every night, oh every night, the stars push through to pinprick bright. The greater my love, the deeper the hurt, says the lover who thrived on rancour. By Christ, the idiot calls at the start, I'd tie it all down with an anchor. Only every day, and pretty near every night, the wind goes yanking the world away. We'd anchor it down all right, but the waves won't do as we say. The waves won't do as we say. And this is called All Right Then, Are We? We've been walking across farmland to the coast. The sea lions you were warned to keep at a distance. The cliffs that sensibly you imagine are most to be avoided by solitary walkers. The weird glance that at times can make you wonder, should I ask if he feels all right? Although we never do, and then we'll forget we've thought it. And the stiff plod on the dunes, collars turned at the southerly blowing in from the scoured ice, the furthest sea. It's the loneliness I love, sometimes one of us says, the appalling edge, the vast extremity of whatever we care to imagine beyond the haze. On the way back, the dog raging at gulls, raucous and out of range, at a rabbit's breaking cover close to the pines, the forecast squalls smudging the edged-in horizon, the hacking of a motor on the estuary's dull reflected cloud. Then, is there anything sadder, you say, seeing a dead tractor tilted by a stack of collapsing wood? Once back on the road, we put the dog on its lead, find the car, drive in from the always deceiving coast. And later, it was vitriol right out there, the storm following us in, its slanted, flailing sleet, and the loneliness out there, back here. This is called As It Should Be Called. A dog I saw and heard of, rather than spoke to, hated to hear of a wolf that hung around cabins in a Russian story, not to scavenge for scraps, and in fact ignoring the congealed fat chucked towards him by a delinquent daughter, but waiting, knowing it was hoping against hope, that once, even if by chance or by total error in Arctic winter gloom, he would know how it felt, a human hand caressing or casually brushing against his skull. The way, I suppose, a relative of mine waited desperately to be frightened by wayward ghosts, and so prove emptiness after all was not totally empty. This dog, everyone's favourite incidentally, had no more wanted to be a domestic pet than did any wild creature on first hearing that such was possible even. Hence you'll take on board the cogency of his feeling about the wolf who betrayed. That became his title for the story he so resented, not knowing a further fact about it, the date, the author, nothing, but another title simply, did not suffice but this, the wolf who betrayed. And I'll finish, in spite of my thing about life writing, I'll finish with a sort of love poem. It's called After That, to begin with. The wind has talked through most of what we have said together. The wind has cleared its throat as though doing us a favour. We wait the streaming of leaves to pile the corners of the veranda before we say, the wind we never would have believed could last so long has scarcely begun. Then proving us wrong, there is stillness the shape of crystal slipped over the hollow of the wind. A new fear, a different fear, making us stand and look to trees carved from something darker than darkness. And we say, at least a few stars have made it. Surprising us, the stars, are being able to say, for certain, an exhilaration was after all as our simply observing distance and giving it a name and saying, there are 7 now that we count, 7, which seems an extraordinary thing to say. 7 stars after so much wind, and the silence laid like a scythe against a wall for wind to dry. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Now it's my pleasure to welcome our final poet for the evening, all the way from Wellington. So I'm introducing Helen Rickerby to the Dunedin audience. Helen has never read in Dunedin before, so it's fantastic that she's here today to do so. Helen is, as I say, she lives in Wellington. She's an editor and a publisher as well as a poet. She has 4 collections to her name. Her most recent collection is Cinema, published by Makara Press, and I know that it's out there on the table. She's the co-managing editor with Claire Needham of the Wellington-based literary journal JAM, which is JAAM, just another art magazine. Movement, just another art movement, which was founded in 1995 by Mark Perry and other writers in Wellington. And Helen was involved with their journal right from the start. It publishes story, essay and poetry, and it's renowned for publishing new writers as well as established writers. So it's a very exciting journal. But I would say that I've just guest edited the last the privilege of guest editing this year's one, which will come out in September or October. So it's up to issue 32. It's now published annually. Helen is the publisher behind Seraph Press, which is a boutique publisher of poetry with a growing reputation for high-quality work and high-quality production values. Books as beautiful objects, as well as having beautiful work inside them. And she's published 10 poems, 10 books of poetry in that capacity of other people's work. Helen's poetry is informed by life, but in Helen's case, when I read her work, I see a lot of influence of film and literature and art. Masks and costumes are examined, myths and archetypes are tried and tested. And the question that seems to run through Helen's work when I read it is, what does it mean to live here now, in an urban culture, in a globally connected world? And how do we live with and in a very public culture and yet carve a private and authentic identity for ourselves? How do we find our own pace and our own place? In her collection, My Iron Spine, for example, Helen tries on a different persona, like Marie Curie, Catherine Mansfield, Kate Sheppard, Minnie Dean, and Virginia Woolf. There's a question in one of her poems, one of her poems ends with the question which I think resounds through her work, which is, who are we? Who are we? Who are we? Welcome, Helen.
Thank you, Sue. I am really, really excited to be here, actually. I'm so delighted to have been asked. And especially to read with such esteemed poets, and especially Vincent, who when I was a a wee undergraduate at Victoria University. He was a professor, and so it's particularly exciting. So because it's Poetry Day, I'm going to start with a couple of poems about poets. As Sue mentioned, I have some they're kind of persona poems, kind of biographical poems. And this one is about Emily Bronte, who was a poet, although we probably, well, I certainly know her much better as the author of Wuthering Heights, that great, passionate, kind of crazy novel. And so this is called Passion. A curmudgeonly critic once said that Emily Bronte was clearly a lesbian. It's irrefutable, he said, because her words were so passionate. Therefore, she was a woman of strong sexual desire. She never married, she never had a boyfriend, and so, obviously, was gay. I imagine Emily with a series of lovers taking off each other's empire lines and discreet hollows on the chilly moors. Emily wearing scarlet, but oh, not anymore. I imagine the love letters, the fights. Things may have been thrown because when one has such passion. Emily lived with her sisters for her 31 years. She never made a friend, said Charlotte. What to do with all that passion? This is about Sylvia Plath, who I return to every now and then, and I'm currently returned to. So, I thought I'd read this. This is about when she was a young woman in America, and she tried to kill herself. I have a suspicion it may have had something to do with trying to write academic work about Finnegan's Wake, which possibly would do that too. But after this, she ended up with a scar on her cheek. I also have a scar on my cheek, not from trying to kill myself, because I haven't, but because I was pushed down a bank by a boy. I had stolen his cricket ball. So, this is Sylvia Fights Off the Boys. Every time it comes around to this, I know when to expect it. He will caress my face with his forefinger, his floppy fringe hanging over his eyes. He will trace the scar on my cheek, back and forth, erasing it. And he will say, "How did you get this?" And each time I tell another story. But the truth of it is, it was a roller skating accident. And the truth of it is, a pirate with his rapier. And the truth of it is, I am a rotting apple and it is my worm. And the truth of it is, it was the sharp bite of death. And the truth of it is, I hit my face climbing out of my grave. But the truth of it is, good girls don't have scars. Is there anybody from Southland? Yay? Not so many. We're obviously not in Southland, but this is the furthest south I've ever read. And so I thought I would take this opportunity to read a poem about Minnie Dean. So you probably mostly know that Minnie Dean is the only woman in New Zealand to have been hung. And she was hung, or she's convicted for murdering a child, although she is thought to have murdered several children, or it may have been an accident. But in any case, and she's apparently become in Southland quite a kind of a boogie woman. And the guy that I knew was trying to write a film about her, so I learned quite a bit about her when we were talking about this. And so in this book, I mean, at the end of it, there's these poems where I hang out with these famous women from history who probably wouldn't hang out with me in real life, like Virginia Woolf and Heather Mansfield. Whereas Minnie Dean, I don't think I would hang out with her in real life. But in this poem, I do. It's called Handicrafts with Minnie Dean. I have never before been in the presence of a murderess. The very word ices my spine, a word to be whispered, hissed, gossiped. She has knitting needles instead of fingers, the little girls sing. Her fingers click, click, click. They cast nightmare shadows, but she can knit 5 booties at once, 5 baby vests, 5 bonnets. It's just as well, I think, looking down at my own empty needles and judging by the noise from the nursery, there are a lot of feet to warm, heads to cover. I love babies, she says, little cherubs. You better be good or you'll be sent to Minnie Dean's farm and you'll never be seen again. I have tangled my wool again. She patiently showed me how to cast on, and it's all coming back slowly, but I'm not sure if I'm knitting or purling. When I look up, she is wearing a hat that she wasn't before. It is black with a white rose curled around the crown. My travelling hat, she winks, pokes a jewelled pin where her fontanelle would be if she had one. But no, it's just a trick of the light, and the blood dripping from the hat box in the corner is just a shadow. She runs them through with hat pins, she throws them out of trains. The draught is wisping, lisping under the uneven floorboards, skittering through the walls and around my feet. I feel her eyes on me, but when I look she is busy sewing the seams on the bonnets. Now the little darlings won't get cold. The babies that no one else loves are calling for her, would die without her. She is not a woman on whom I would turn my back. I'm going to read a newish poem now. A friend who was writing some stories about mermaids joked that we could do a mermaid project, and I said ha ha ha, and then I went home and wrote mermaid poems. So, and this is called Mr. Anderson, You Heartbreaker You. Oh, Hans Christian Andersen, you tormentor of children, creator of nightmares. The little mermaid always did me in with her big love and her enormous silence, and giving up her fishy tail for 2 legs, maybe to part them for her sweet prince, but relegated to the friend zone. Each shard of glass she stepped on pricked a tiny hole into my squishy little heart. And really, if she just held onto her tongue, she could have sung him to her, reeled him in, drunk him down, one prince on the rocks, coming up.